In this short video, we're going to be discussing rules and procedures of the secondary classroom. Similar to our last video, in this video we'll be taking a lot of information from Carol Weinstein's Secondary Classroom Management, and there will be a link to that book in the doobly-doo as well.
Rules and procedures are very important for creating a safe environment, just as physical setting is.
That's very true, Whitney. It's really important for students that are still trying to figure out who they are to have clearly defined boundaries, and you as a teacher need to be that classroom manager that protects them and shelters them through the crazy chaos that is secondary school.
Quite.
Hi, Caity and Whitney. Carol here. I just want to tell you a little bit more about my 4 principles for planning classroom rules. So as you know, there are 4 principles for planning classroom rules, and each one of them has a couple questions that you need to think about when you're planning your future classrooms. So here you go. The first principle is that rules should be reasonable and necessary. And some guiding questions when you're thinking about these rules are, what rules are age appropriate for my level that I'm teaching, and do I have a really good reason for this rule? The second question is rules need to be clear and understandable. When you're thinking about the clarity of your rules, make sure that your language is not abstract, and also you need to think about what extent do you want your students to be involved in this decision-making process of the rules. The third principle is that rules should be consistent with instructional goals and what we know about how people learn. What you really need to think about here is whether or not the rule will facilitate or hinder your students' learning. The fourth principle is that classroom rules need to be consistent with school rules. And really what you need to think about here is whether or not they fit in with what your administration wants and if they comply with the behaviors that are expected of your students in the hallways and/or classrooms. Thanks, guys. I hope my principles help you in your future career, and I hope to speak to you soon. Wow, Carol, thank you for that information. Now we're going to talk about a couple examples that'll fit Carol's 4 principles of rules and regulations.
So the first principle, that rules should be reasonable and necessary.
That's kind of obvious, don't you think? Just like
Definitely.
the laws we live under that are given to us by our government are all reasonable and necessary, it is important that the rules and regulations in your classroom are reasonable and necessary and understandable by your children.
Definitely. You don't want to have rules that have nothing to do with your children. For instance, when I was in high school, in our handbook, we had lots and lots of outdated rules.
If you have a rule or regulation in your classroom, it is very important that you enforce it the same across the board so all students know that they cannot break your rules and that there will be the same consequence for every rule breaker.
Dr. Weinstein's second point is that rules could be clear and understandable.
As we stated in our previous video, it's really important that your rules and regulations and expectations and objectives for the day are all written in language that students can understand and not teacher language. The easiest way to make sure your rules are clear and understandable is have your students create their rules themselves.
Very much so. Not only does this make your students know that the rules are valuable, but it also makes sure that they know what they're talking about.
It also tells your students that you think their opinions about their lives are valuable.
Even better than that is if you can make a rule be student enforced.
You see this a lot in college classrooms when teachers say, if one cell phone goes off, everybody gets 10 points deducted from their grade.
I hate it when they say that.
Me too, but that ensures that all students ensure that all other students follow the rules.
Carol's third point is that rules should be consistent with instructional goals and with what we know about how people learn.
So this is where your teacher education classes come in handy.
Thanks, Mississippi State.
It's really important that your rules are applicable to the stage of development that your students are at.
Definitely. You would not want to make a rule that your students simply could not follow
or could not understand because of where they are developmentally. The fourth and final of Dr. Weinstein's principles is classroom rules need to be consistent with school rules.
It's very important. It's not fair for your students to be getting one thing from your principal and another from you.
For example, when I was in high school, we had a uniform policy, and every student knew what classroom they could get away with a shirt untucked or a t-shirt that wasn't school appropriate, basically anything that disagreed with the uniform policy. It's really unfortunate that there were certain teachers that students knew wouldn't care because that breaks Carol Weinstein's 4th principle.
Quite. A lot of times, teachers will let students get away with things to make them like them more. But really, students will respect and like you more if you are consistent with the classroom and school rules.
That's very true, Whitney. Thank you for that insightful bit of knowledge.
You're welcome.
So, we hope you enjoyed this short video on rules and regulations. As always, you can read Dr. Carol Weinstein's textbook on secondary classroom management. The next video in our series will be a bit longer, and it will be on enhancing motivation. And we hope you enjoy that one just as much as you enjoyed this one.